Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for participating in today's webinar on collaborating to increase access to employment and education opportunities for survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, and sexual assault. My name is Monica Arenas from Futures Without Violence. And feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, but please keep in mind that the public chat is open and visible to everyone participating in this session. So be careful not to share private information or confidential rather. Please note that closed captioning is available and can be accessed through the bottom toolbar on your screen, and you'll see a CC closed captioning icon. ASL interpretation is also being provided. Thank you for the captioners and the interpreters. The recording, slides, and handouts will be sent to you next week and will be posted on the website. We're also joined today by Caroline Olivia and Missy Blackwell. Caroline is a senior training and technical assistance specialist at Futures Without Violence and is part of the Workplaces and Economic Justice System team program here at Futures. Caroline focuses on improving access to quality education and employment opportunities for survivors of trafficking and gender-based violence. Prior to Futures, Caroline served as the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Access Youth and Immigration Services, one of the largest victim rights and employment services agencies in San Diego County. Missy oversees Safe Flight job training programs in Hendersonville, North Carolina, with over 25 years of experience working with survivors. And Missy also believes in empowering people to recognize their own strengths and abilities, and with a supportive environment that everyone can be for everyone to be successful. Thank you, Caroline and Missy, for sharing your experience today. We're looking forward to hearing about you. We will share the bios in a minute. So in the next slide, please. This webinar is part of a project called Building Collaborative Responses to Trafficked Victims of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault. And we thank the Department of Justice, Office on Violence Against Women for their support for this project. And in the next slide, we have some information about this project, a link to our website with resources. And as part of this technical assistance project, we hold free trainings, webinars, and can share resources and advocacy on collaboration for improving responses to survivors of human trafficking with an intersection of domestic violence and sexual assault. And resources are listed on our website for downloading. And in the next slide, we will review briefly our learning objectives for today. So as a result of this webinar, we hope that you're better able to recognize the intersection of domestic violence and sexual assault and human trafficking, and also the impact on the physical and mental health of survivors. So the webinar has several sections. First, we'll have a brief review of the intersections of and also the impact on mental health to survivors. We'll describe the obstacles on education and training, and also consider and describe the local workforce development agencies, educational institutions, job training readiness programs, and also the importance for collaboration. And we will also Missy will share their experience on their program at Safe Flight in North Carolina on their workforce development and educational program that includes a restaurant and also a store and other support for survivors. And we will also share resources with you throughout the program, and you will receive that through a handout. And So now I will turn it over to Caroline, who will start us with the first section.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this next hour and a half with us as we talk about building meaningful collaborations for the employment and education of human trafficking survivors. Before we can go into all of those details, it's important for us to remind you all about the intersections that human trafficking survivors experience. Unfortunately, in the victim services field or survivor field, we tend to operate in silos. So human trafficking is over here in this corner, while sexual assault and DV are in another location. However, it's important to know that by the time a human trafficking survivor is in front of you, they have most likely experienced some sort of sexual assault in their lifetime. They've most likely been a victim of intimate partner violence, and have also experienced so many vulnerabilities that make it difficult for them to access the education and employment resources that are available in their communities. So some examples of those vulnerabilities are poverty and homelessness, immigration status, either child abuse that they've experienced or adverse childhood events, low access to healthcare, and low literacy, to name a few. We also tend to separate sexual exploitation from labor exploitation, but we just want you to know that this is an intersectional experience. And so it's important for us to be able to look for those intersections and develop programs and systems that will be able to address each of these vulnerabilities. So let's talk about the next slide, please. Why are we focusing on employment and education? Why is this a priority? The first reason is that for a lot of survivors of human trafficking, employment or their relationship to money, their relationship to employment is impacted by the victimization that they've experienced as a survivor. So if we do not focus on building meaningful and safe employment and education options, then we're leaving out a large area of healing, right? A large tool for healing for survivors of human trafficking. The second is that when you ask survivors, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you need to feel safe or to feel like you are moving towards, long-term well-being? Survivors mention employment. They mention empowerment, being able to be independent and not rely on those individuals or systems that have exploited them in the past. Also, we know from research that access to safe employment and education options reduce the vulnerabilities that a trafficking survivor has. And reduces their vulnerability to being in abusive relationships or being in abusive systems. So it's important for us to really focus on those long-term needs of employment and education, but looking at it from the perspective of that intersectionality. So that is one of the reasons why it should be the center of a lot of the work that we do, and not a byproduct, which it tends to be sometimes in the different communities that we serve. Next slide, please. So before we move forward, Moni is going to walk us through a chat because we would like to engage with you. We want to hear your questions, and we want to hear where you're coming from. So Moni?
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, yes, so we want to hear about the barriers that survivors are experiencing or that you see that are experiencing that impact their education and employment opportunities. And I know you shared many through the registration, so please share in the chat. And we're seeing immigration status, no identification, childcare, criminal records, their job history, lack of high school education, trauma, accommodations for trauma, transportation, lack of housing, and money and disabilities, and what else do we see? Family law, and they don't feel the mood to look for jobs or attend to an interview, and it's probably because of the trauma and limited English speaking, having to miss work due to trauma, victim blaming from others that don't accept their experience and their trauma or lack of awareness on that. Thank you for sharing all of these challenges that we see and that Caroline will review more in a minute. And what else do we see here? Literacy, safety concerns, trying to distance self from abusers, so have to avoid certain places or of employment, education, dual arrest. Thank you for sharing. Now Caroline will review some of these challenges and the trauma impact.
So next slide, please. Thank you, Moni, for walking us through that. And thank you all so much for participating in the chat. We know that you all see these barriers on a consistent basis, and we thank you for uplifting them. So, as Moni has said, some of you have mentioned, not having access to shelter or, their legal status or having kids, different things like that impact their ability to access education and employment. And what we want you to understand is how trauma, all of this could be considered some form of trauma, can impact particularly education and employment. So we know that there are common trauma responses, and we break them up into 3 different sections of emotional, physical, or cognitive. So for emotional, that anxiety or fear, numbness, withdrawal from, relationships or environments. We know about depression or suicidal ideation. So those emotional things can impact a survivor's ability to follow through with different education and employment options. We also know that trauma shows up physically. So chronic pain, sleep problems, panic attacks. So imagine someone trying to make it through their first week of work, but are constantly in chronic pain, or their body is not allowing them to really retain the information that they are dealing with. We also know that there are cognitive impacts. So difficulty concentrating, difficulty paying attention, so very hypervigilant and feeling like the environment is unsafe, and even decreased working memory, to name a few. So all of these common trauma responses can impact a person's ability to access education and employment, but also successfully complete the opportunities that are available for them. And so it's important just to remember that, and so that we are not victim blaming. I believe someone put that in the chat box, that we're not victim blaming, but we're truly understanding that there are responses going on in a person's body and in a person's mind that are impacting their ability to access these resources. Next slide, please. We also know from research that violence and trauma, if you look at all of the individuals that have experienced some sort of violence or trauma, they tend to have fewer years of education. They have an increased likelihood of dropping out of school and job training programs. They're more likely to quit or be fired. And they have chronic health conditions, such as PTSD or depression, or GI issues that make it difficult, that interfere with their ability to succeed in certain academic and work environments. And so it's just important to know that. And if you start with that understanding, it makes it easier to navigate some of the hiccups that can happen along the way when you're trying to support a survivor in this place. Next slide, please. And so research has also shown that survivors of domestic violence report that fear and interference from an abusive partner negatively impacts their ability to work. Students who experience sexual harassment or violence are more likely to have a lower grade point average. So if you need to have a certain grade to succeed in a training, and that survivor is not reaching that, it's, you know, you have to look into the trauma and violence that's going into that. We also know that nearly 25% of students with a history of sexual violence or abuse participate less in class. They withdraw from activities. So there's diminished engagement in the programs that are around them. And then we also know that students with histories of trauma, especially child trauma, are 2.34 times more likely to drop out of school. There's a survey of domestic violence survivors that found that 17% dropped out of training programs because of the actions of their abusive partners. And so, you know, it's just important to know how intertwined violence and trauma is with success in education and employment opportunities. And so instead of viewing them as siloed experiences, all of the systems have to come together and acknowledge how pervasive, you know, trauma is within the communities that we serve. Also acknowledge that it's impacting people's ability to succeed in these spaces. Next slide, please. So then what do we do? You know, that is the big question. And I'm sure that's the question that you all are asking. Thanks for letting us know all of the things that are in the way, but what do we do about it? There are two approaches. The first is prevention, right? So we come together to create safe and supportive spaces that help to diminish and mitigate the impacts of violence and abuse. So that can be our own nonprofits being a safe space for that particular survivor, or developing relationship with employers that we have vetted, and we know that when a survivor goes into that space, that they're entering a place that's already safe and not finding out after the fact that it was a place of harm. So prevention is one area that we can focus on, and then the other is response. So really looking at our organizational structures, looking at the different treatments that we offer, and asking ourselves, is this truly trauma informed? And is it truly based on an empowerment model? Because trauma informed and empowerment model are two different things, you know? And so we want to make sure that we're really looking at our systems and saying, was that the most empowering way that we could have delivered that information? Did we give survivors an opportunity to show their skills, right? Or to let us know what it is that they're interested in? And so we'd be surprised how often we don't do that, because we're maneuvering in crisis, and we're trying to have quick turnarounds in supporting someone. So really slowing down and focusing on our response is important. Next slide. So let's talk about economic empowerment. So we talked about, you know, moving from an empowerment model. What does that mean when it comes to economic empowerment? There are 5 tiers that we consider to be economic empowerment or key features of workforce development. So step 1, when you're dealing with a human trafficking survivor, you know, sexual assault or domestic violence survivor, or anyone that has experienced some sort of trauma in their lifetime, is crisis management and stabilization. That is step 1, and it's very important because of all of the reasons that we just communicated. The crisis and the trauma, it will get in the way of an individual's ability to retain information and to successfully complete programs. So if we do not address that crisis initially, then there is a high chance that we're setting up that individual for failure, because we're not having these conversations about how to address that trauma or those trauma responses that will come up in those environments. The next tier for successful economic empowerment is career exploration. So many of our survivors are never really asked, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you want to be? What is it that you're good at, right? And those questions are so important for being able to help a survivor transition from crisis to empowerment, to thriving, to identifying more with their strengths, right, than their weaknesses. And so career exploration is so important. Another reason that that is important is that a lot of our survivors have not been exposed to all the many different possibilities that are out there when it comes to employment or economic success. And not just survivors, I mean, anyone, right? We grow up thinking that there are only three boxes: the lawyer, the doctor, right? Or the nurse, or whatever it may be. But we don't know about any of the other areas that are just as lucrative, maybe less time to reach those areas of success. And so through career exploration, you're able to really open up those possibilities and allow survivors to see themselves in spaces outside of where they're currently living. And so some examples of that are career panels, where you bring in different speakers, different survivor advocates who are thriving in their economic fields, and allowing them to communicate their process and what their experience is on a day-to-day basis. Or traveling to different headquarters so that they can see the behind the scenes of a particular industry that they may already have contact with. Those are some examples of career exploration. The next section is skill building and basic job readiness. So many of you put in the chat box, we have limited skills. Like, what do we do to help survivors increase their skills? So that is the next component. So whether that's a local training that's being offered in your community, partnering with systems that already offer those trainings, which we'll talk about shortly, job readiness and work readiness is important during that phase. And then the next two are experience building and employment retention. So experience building is on-the-job training. Are there internships or volunteer opportunities? Are there leadership opportunities that are available in your own nonprofit for a survivor to take advantage of? These are all different things that can help build the experience of a survivor. And then employment retention. So it's not about just getting a job. It's about getting a quality job. It's about getting a job that will be sustainable, and allowing that particular individual to be able to successfully stay in that job beyond that 1 month, that 2 months. And so that is the last component of economic empowerment. I see a question in the chat box. What if survivors don't want to participate in job trainings and internships due to the fact that it does not yield the financial results they desire? That is a great question. The truth about economic empowerment is that it takes time. And that's the sad part about this process, is that we hope that we could, do it in 2 weeks, and it's, by the end of those 2 weeks, that person is in a job that pays well. But unfortunately, that is not always the case. So a huge part of that is really taking the time to have conversations with survivors about what the end result is. And also finding ways to connect with programs that have incentives for participating in job trainings and internships. And so when I talk about the workforce development system and partnering with them shortly, there are a lot of incentives in that space that can pay a survivor to participate in job trainings and internships. So that's one way to address that particular problem. But it's really having honest dialogue that while you may not be getting the return of investment right now, immediately, over time, there's a lot of opportunity for you ahead. So thank you for that, question, and I'll be sure to return to it as we're moving forward. Okay, next slide, please. So let's talk about the workforce development system. So there are many collaborations and partnerships that we can do to support our survivors when it comes to education and employment. But the one system that we would really like you all to be aware of is the workforce development system, and really going and building meaningful relationships with them, because they have a lot of the resources that you all need to support your survivors. Next slide, please. So the workforce development system, there's many different components. The Department of Labor has identified a large amount of money, and it's a very, very large amount of money that is it's being underutilized, right? So this is one of the reasons why we want you to be aware of it, so that you can go and leverage these resources. And so they created a program called the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, or WIOA for short. And this money goes into our education system, and it goes into different Department of labor programs for employment training. And so some examples of that is adult education and literacy. There's vocational rehabilitation programs. There's programs for dislocated workers and youth. And so there's money and resources in this system that are untapped. And so next slide, please. And so the money in this system, they have identified different barriers to education and employment that they would like to focus on. So the list is very extensive: formerly incarcerated or involved in the justice system, pregnant and parenting, youth who have dropped out of high school, those with disabilities. And so this money has been set aside to go to different programs who are focusing on each of those barriers. And so as we know about the intersections and vulnerabilities of our survivors of human trafficking, they are able to qualify for these dollars, for these trainings, and for these job opportunities that have already been set aside for them. So the biggest role that we have to do as victim service agencies is to build a meaningful connection and relationship with these systems, so that there are warm referrals, that we're bringing them in-house to offer many of these trainings, and really connecting to leverage those funds to take care of some of the challenges that we're seeing. Next slide. And then thank you so much for the question about undocumented persons. I will answer that in just a minute. So how do you access these WIOA services? The first is that you want to find a program near you. And if you go into the PowerPoint, there's a link to a program finder. So if you put in your location, you'll be able to see a list of those organizations or those locations that are offering WIOA services. So step one is just finding out where are they. Step two is really learning about what is the eligibility for these programs, so that you can identify whether your survivors are eligible for them, and then how you can connect them to these resources. Step three is really understanding the barriers to the referral system. So they're not a perfect, it is not a perfect system. I want to say that out loud. It is not a perfect system. Some of you have already probably tried to build a relationship with these systems and have walked away feeling that it was unsuccessful. But I don't want you to give up because of that. We want you to really go back and have an advocate and say, we tried it. These are the things that did not work. What can we do to make it better? Right? What can we do to address these barriers? And so that's very important to do. And then the fourth is to develop a strategic partnership or collaboration with these entities. So once again on the slide, there's also a finder for a local adult education system that has ESL classes and some basic trainings and workshops that people can take advantage of. There's also an apprenticeship finder where you can find apprenticeship programs near you, and then an American Job Center finder. So I just encourage you to look for them, get to know them, build a relationship with them, because it is a critical partner when you are trying to work on the education and employment of survivors of human trafficking. Next slide. So back to that question about how do we support undocumented individuals? We do know that if the individual does not have a right to work, they cannot take advantage of the paid, internship or job placement opportunities within this system, but they can take advantage of the trainings and job skills portion of this system. So that's one thing that I want to make clear, is that a lot of the survivors who are undocumented, if they're still looking to build their skills, this is still a good system to partner with. And then we have to get a bit more creative on the actual job placement part or side of it. And so we'll continue to have that dialogue. We have developed a primer to understand the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. So there's a link to that. It lets you know what is what, how do you navigate it, what's involved. So we encourage you to take a look at that primer and get to familiarize yourself with the system a bit more. Next slide. So once again, back to that question for those who are undocumented. Foreign national survivors of human trafficking are eligible for Title I services under WIOA. So, go ahead and ask them, ask your local WIOA services what protections are in place for survivors of human trafficking who may be undocumented, and they will let you know what they can take advantage of. But there are protections that have been put in place within this system for survivors of human trafficking, regardless of their immigration status, or even if they're in that process of waiting to receive their their different visas. So, just do some work on your end to figure out how the closest program to you is functioning. Often that individual has to be 18 and up, and they need some sort of letter of certification from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services that help them understand what that individual is going through. So, ask about it, and then go ahead and start working on getting some of those letters of certifications together. And if you have questions about what that is, we'll put our office hours link up here at the end of the webinar so that we can talk about it more. Also, the workforce programs, public libraries are receiving money from the Department of Labor. There are certain nonprofits who are doing workforce development who are receiving money, unions, apprenticeships. So the network is very large. And so, we just encourage you to start asking questions about, what resources they have so that you can leverage them. Next slide. So here are some final resources for you. So we just ask that you add them to your network. I want to call up the Adult Basic Education System. Once again, that system has English as a second language classes that they offer for free. They tend to do that for free. And then they do a lot of the quick turnaround training, such as CNA, medical assistant, phlebotomy, things like that, that a person can do within a short period of time in order to get that employment. So we just encourage you to look at that adult education, and it tends to be free or subsidized pretty significantly because they are receiving funding from WIOA. Next slide. So are there any questions about the workforce development system or how you would collaborate with them? We just want to make sure that you have a strong understanding that this is a critical resource and a critical point of collaboration when it comes to education and employment. Okay. So I will now turn it over to Missy Oh, I think I saw, uh, Sadaf, you said you have a question, but I don't, how do we get in touch with assistance? So do you mean assistance with the workforce development system, or do you mean, okay, so the links that are in the PowerPoint, allow you to see what locations are near you and their contact information. So the step one is to just click on those links and search for the closest closest organizations near you, and then reach out to them and begin building a collaboration or meaningful relationship with them. Learn about them is the best way to go, because each state does it differently. So the way that San Diego, which is where I have worked, within the system, is very different than maybe a rural location. And so it's important for you to look up and see how it's functioning in a place near you. Awesome, thank you. Are there communities who have successfully done this that could serve as a model? Yes, there are communities that have successfully done this. I am going to put in a collaboration guide into the chat box that has case studies, but I'm going to turn it over to Missy to talk a little bit about collaborations, and they too are a great community that has shown how this collaboration has worked successfully. So we'll move into that section while I look for that link.
We do next slide, please. So as we're looking at how we collaborate in a community of collaboration that leads to success for our survivors, we have to remember those parts of the trauma-informed programs, realizing, like Caroline said, how widespread trauma is. She added some statistics, and I'll put a few more out there. If 1 in 4 women have experienced intimate partner violence, and 1 in 4 teenagers has been harassed by technology or on technology, and 44% of the sexual assault victims are less than 15 years old, that would lead me to believe that trauma is pervasive. So remembering that as we're bringing people together and we're looking at the responses to trauma, we're looking at how we add programs together to be as helpful and goal-oriented for our survivors. Caroline also did a beautiful job talking about how trauma impacts our lives, impacts lives physically, emotionally, spiritually, creates coping mechanisms that may not always be efficient or effective as we grow older. We're looking at mental health issues and addiction issues. So how our community can respond and how we can come together is by incorporating our understanding into our agencies, into our programs, into our collaborations. So how do we provide safety? Not just physical safety, but that psychological safety that our survivors need. So a space where it's not only physically comfortable, but then there can either be an opportunity to share or sit in silence. And then how do our programs and collaborations offer the transparency that's going to build trust? How do we operate on a level where we have a goal, we meet a goal, and we're transparent about that goal, and empowering our clients to meet their own goals? Peer support and mutual self-help. How do we allow that trust to be built and establish that safe support and empowerment by having survivors come together, or having our agency diverse and integrated enough where we can be open and honest about supporting one another and build those relationships? Collaboration, again, coming together as a community to address the issues at hand, and being real with how trauma impacts so many different levels of our lives. Empowerment, giving our survivors a voice, giving them choices, looking at the difference between helping someone, because we all want to help folks, but how do we empower them to help themselves? How do we offer all the different pieces so that our survivors have their own true identity? how do we honor their cultural identity, their gender identity, their historical identity? So putting all those pieces together and recognizing how being trauma informed, we consciously and intentionally daily resist the flaws or opportunities that might re-traumatize, looking at things that might currently be harmful in our programs, and how can we address those? How can we become more trauma informed and understand trauma response, setting policies and procedures that allow people to heal and grow and move forward. Next slide. Thank you. So the difference between helping and empowering, it's that, what's the old adage about give them a fish and they eat for a day, teach them to fish, and it's a lifetime. By empowering our clients, we're giving folks an opportunity for lifelong skill building and reclaiming who they are, and educational and employment opportunities. So the two things here we're looking at is planning with the client. So that exploration of employment and education and career long term, what do you think you want to do? Who are you? Where are you going? What had you always dreamed to be? Helping clients to look at their own resources and how can they access resources, and or giving those lists. There's been several different lists presented to us as professionals today. Quite empowering. I can go find these programs in my community. Teaching our clients to problem solve, adding that piece of skill that is often lost along the way based on the trauma that they've experienced. A full range of opportunities, a full range of less than classic opportunities for folks, looking outside of the boxes that sometimes we put ourselves in and sometimes our survivors get put in, busting some of those myths about domestic violence and sexual assault and human trafficking, so that people can have all the opportunity to be whoever they want to be, even if they don't know who that is today. Take responsibility for the process, but encourage the client and empower the client to take responsibility for their choices, their decisions, and their life goals. It may not be anything we ever thought we wanted to do. However, it's not our lives. So we empower those clients to move forward in their education, in their employment, in their healing and growth and survival. I think now there's an opportunity for chat. Can we move the next slide forward, please? All right, Monica?
Yes.
I'll let you pick that piece.
Yes, thank you, Missy, for sharing all of those strategies for empowerment and trauma-informed. So now we want to hear about the strategies that you participants have found helpful in supporting survivors with employment and education opportunities. So please share in the chat. I want to hear from you and for each other, for you to hear from each other or to learn. So what strategies and partnerships have been helpful for you in supporting survivors with employment? And we know that many of you are already providing support and you have experience in supporting survivors. So do we see any comments in the chat? Ursula, we have a local resource in Bartholomew County, Forks, that is funded with United Way. That is one of several referral options. We teach them to be software engineers. Wow, Bella Coco, that's great. Others? Having career coaching, working with Capital Idea. Sadaf Patel is sharing. Having career coaching, working with the Capital Idea, also Fort Bend Drive. Work with Anissa. I'm not sure what that means. Referral to match grant programs. Ileana Taylor sharing that. Summer internship opportunities with the county, shared by Brenna. And okay, great. Keep sharing. And you also work with county-specific community colleges, workforce development resources. Okay, great. So we'll go, keep sharing, please. And thank you so much for sharing. Also, you collaborate with Goodwill Employment Resources, community colleges. Great. So in the next slide, we have, we will now discuss briefly about collaborations and how these collaborations help meet the unique needs of survivors, since no one organization can provide all of these services. And so it's important to foster empowerment and healing for survivors, as Missy shared. Additionally, the collaborations with the community partners can help identify gaps and enhance advocacy, capacity, and resources through the partnerships. And the partnerships with workforce development and educational programs look different based on the program and also the community and the relationship that you build with that program. So now let's review a few points that are important for building a successful collaboration with education and employment programs. So first of all, it's important to identify the employment and training programs in your community. And now you have these links to resources where you're able to identify, map where are they and how, and then build relationships, connect with them, and in order to create a referral network that you're able to connect the community that you work with, learn about their services, their roles in supporting survivors, or just the community in general. And so focusing and highlighting with them as you build those relationships, the strengths that survivors have, and promote shared trauma-informed practices for collaboration and also communication. So also providing training or capacity building for these programs to incorporate trauma-informed services. And then also ensure to incorporate and promote the availability of advocacy to support survivors while they're participating in those employment and educational programs, to connect, and that they're able also to refer survivors for support with crisis. And also it's important to formalize those partnerships and create protocols for making and receiving the referrals, and also put together memorandums of understanding that clarify the roles, including a referral process and confidentiality. And I think Missy will also share a lot about their experiences and strategies on this in a minute. In the next slide, we cover a few key questions on partnerships, and Caroline mentioned several earlier about clarifying the requirements of the programs, if they require certain citizenship status, or do they accept individuals with a U visa or T visa certification letters through the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services? Do they bar individuals with prior arrest or criminal records? Are there previous levels of education degrees required, or what are the certifications that must be completed prior to enrolling? And also open and closing enrollment, what is the cost? And and also the program structure, is it in person, online, flexible hours, timeline, what type of support is provided during the program, peer learning, mentorship opportunities, such as job counseling, childcare, mental health services, all of this is very important, as well as economic support. Is there economic support or scholarships available during this program? So these are all important considerations as you communicate with these programs in order to clarify with the survivors that you're working. And then in the next slide, we have a few just checkpoints that I'm not going to go in detail because they'll be reviewed later. But the important, and this is also part of a more extensive training, considering confidentiality, expectations, screening and addressing obstacles, and as mentioned, the cross-training training and a strength-based evaluation. So now I will turn it over to Missy, who will share more about their strategies that they have incorporated in their community or in the resources and programs. And she has even show and tell in her office to share with you. So thank you, Missy. And please move to the next slide.
Right. Thank you. There was a question in the chat about transportation. Our agency was fortunate enough to be able to purchase a vehicle. And so we offer transportation for our job training program clients and our other survivors. There are funding sources out there for transportation. I don't know what base your program is or what the opportunity might be for that, but there might be some research on grants and funding sources. We're fortunate, we're in a very small town and we have a bus system, and a lot of our job opportunities are either on site or very close to us. So as was said earlier, I'm Missy Blackwell. I currently run the job training program for Safe Flight. Safe Flight is Henderson County, North Carolina's nonprofit that adds support and services for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse. We have a multifaceted program. We offer mental health services, shelter, employment program, and housing. So we're a large shelter with the long-term goal of helping our survivors, not just through the crisis, but through the long-term opportunity to be independent, to be in a non-violent situation, and to survive the trauma that they've experienced. Next slide, please. Definitely come from a community collaboration and an opportunity to be successful. So in 2013, we decided that having employment and education was key to self-sufficiency and to survivors and to moving forward and having a life worth living. So we created the Dandelion. The Dandelion is a job training opportunity on site, fully functional restaurant. If you're in Western North Carolina and you want to come by, we're right now at 11 to 2:30. So clients can learn hard skills of restaurant work. They can learn to wash dishes and prep food and cook food, plate food. And then there are those opportunities for customer service. So we're not necessarily a menu, but we are bring your food to the table. We work very closely with a lot of our local farmers and food providers, Manna Food Bank. Work really hard to have a beautiful opportunity for our clients to work in. We also have a resale store. And in 2016, we invited our job training program interns to work in our store. So again, it's retail skill, everything from accepting donations and sorting to on the floor as a customer service. We also have a program that we developed in 2017. It was a collaboration with a beautiful program called Artful Pair, and it's a sewing program. So we have survivors who are able to be creative and create a product, almost like a cottage industry, where they make things like napkins and coasters aprons, table runners, things that can be sold, and all those proceeds come back into Safe Flight's client programming. Our job program in 21, middle of last year, was able to receive funding and have an opportunity to develop a career center, which has 8 computer stations. So when we're back able to meet closely, we're going to use that to offer things that might be online job skills, connections with financial education, basic computer skills. We can bring in some of our partnering agencies and they can do things here, which creates that safe environment, that opportunity to collaborate and folks learn and grow in a safe space. Our program is a stipend program. So someone asked earlier about people not wanting to be a part of internships because they're not financially solvent. Our goal is to not necessarily buy a new home, but certainly allow you to have the funding to be able to move forward, to be able to become financially stable and work toward. Our internships are 6 to 9 months. We are looking at long-term goals for folks. We're looking at independence and opportunity. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. So job training about financial stability. So it is a paid position. It is about skill building. The interns are contract workers. So you get a 1099 at the end of the year. You're responsible for your taxes, but you know how much money you're going to have. And then we can work on budgeting. We partner with a program called OnTrack that offers the financial budgeting, rebuild your credit, those kind of things. Each program within the job training program, the restaurant, the store, and the sewing program, there are mentors, job coaches, supervisors on site. We're looking not just at hard job employment skills, we're looking at soft skills, time management and teamwork and rebuilding self-esteem and understanding your trauma and understanding how you might respond. So there's people right there. I do have connections in the community that are beautiful that are reaching out to us to say, hey, when someone finishes their internship, I have these opportunities. The local, actually the city of Hendersonville emailed me yesterday and asked if we might have folks that would like to work for the city. So she sent me the job listings. It's their recruiting and retention officer. I have a relationship with both of our local hospitals. And a relationship with some of the factories. Henderson County is very agricultural, but there's less job opportunity within those fields right now. But there are definitely a lot of manufacturing and opportunities. There's a lot of community connections and a lot of our partners that understand how difficult sometimes working will be, how difficult there might be as far as trauma responses. So the educational piece, we work really closely with our local community college. Caroline spoke of ESL and adult learning and trades. We have a beautiful CNA program, and we have a welding program and an auto mechanic. So plugging people into what they think they might want to do. And a couple of the short education, a short period of time to gain a certification or an education in something that's going to allow you to make money as soon as you're done. They also have a small business course. And so maybe you have an idea for a small business. I can help you with some of the background and case management and the beginning pieces. And then the college can come in and help you with the business planning and the bigger picture. The job training program at Safe Flight has a very holistic and comprehensive look at services. There's case management. if the client is in shelter and working through our job training program, they not only have a case manager in shelter, but then I'm a case manager. We work as a team. We work with the other agencies that we collaborate with as a team. So we're coming together to look at how interpersonal skills might be built, how education might be gained, and how goals might be set that are about who is ready for what job. We can move forward to the next slide. And I do see that there's some questions in the chat. I'll get right to you. So as we look at who are our successful collaborations, Community Action Opportunities has a program called LifeWorks. LifeWorks is job coaching. We recently had a grant with them and had a case manager on site. So our job training program intern had another layer of care, another layer of someone helping them to look at how do you make a living wage? How do you actually take the money that you have and create a life? And it was beautiful parts. Goodwill Career Centers here in our community through the Goodwill Foundation does a great job with the resume building and the job searching and the career inventories, that career exploration part. So we partner with them. I spoke about the college. I can't say enough about our small community college here. They have been delightful to work with. They have the NC Works Career Center. In addition to what I do as far as employment, the comprehensive piece too for our clients, when we're looking at survivors, we have to consider their mental health and their physical health issues. So we have a collaboration with health services in our community to help folks address what might be happening with their body as a result of their trauma. Working with our community to address basic needs. We are fortunate enough to have mental health services on site. We actually have a counseling center through our agency. So there are those opportunities for our clients as well to address their mental health needs, to see things through the lens of their trauma and the response that they might have to the world. Very convenient when perhaps someone working in the restaurant is triggered by someone's behavior. We have that opportunity for not only myself, but potentially their therapist to be a part of processing that with them. Just one second. So next slide, please. So I've talked already about the fact that there's case management. We're going to set goals. They might have a set of goals in shelter, but then we have employment goals. What do you want now? Is it money in your pocket? What do you want long term? A career in whatever you might choose? Or are you just not sure? We'll set goals. We'll evaluate those goals. I meet with folks on a very regular basis, weekly, if not more so, just checking in. How you doing? What's going on? We talked about soft skills of jobs. Working in a restaurant, working in a store, or creating a sewing program is so much more than can I wash a dish or can I hang a shirt? It is about that responsibility and time learning those soft skills that make you most employable. Everything at our agency and through our job training program is survivor centered. It's all strength based. It's empowerment based. Our clients are really successful. When you look at some of the statistics that Caroline put out there, in the last 6 years, we've had a 50% success rate. And that's a big deal because our clients will come to us in trauma, in crisis, They're often from our shelter. They take some time to address those crisis issues. Then we work into the workplace, and it's been super successful. There are policies and procedures in place, and we strive on things being about safety and well-being. So we're talking about our clients being safe in their workplace. How do they feel when they go to work? Do they feel emotionally safe? Do they feel physically safe? We have MOUs. Each of our partnering agencies, there's an MOU that delineates what are they going to do and what can they do. One of the things that we found to be exceptionally successful and a huge part of what we do is our communication, an open line of communication between the survivors and the partnering agencies. We talk about being a team, talk about being that person that's on their side to help them be responsible and accountable, be the biggest cheerleader they've got, and work through whatever issues there may or may not be along the way. I was going to brag a minute. So it's about 6 years. Our job training program's been in play. We've served 238 clients. I currently have 8 interns in the 3 different programs, and that's about our capacity. So it's been a successful journey. It's been a powerful opportunity, not only for the clients, but for our agency to watch people grow and become and move forward. And maybe you meet them in the community at their new position. So thank you. I think we're at a question and answer place. I do want to go back to the chat and look at some of that.
Yeah, so I'll read some of the questions out loud and then we can tag team them up. So are there any opportunities that extend into management or entrepreneurship or business skills and experience? So I know, Missy, you have yours at your organization. A lot of that is in-house, but are you aware of any resources in the community that are good to connect with in that space?
Yes, there are programs through our local community colleges. So it connect our clients. There is both at the Asheville Community College, Asheville Buncombe, and then the Blue Ridge. There are both programs in restaurant management and business. We have a small business help center, for lack of a better term, here in our community as well. So there are those opportunities for folks to do more. And then certainly our restaurant manager here will offer some of those on-site opportunities.
Thank you for that. So yes, your local community colleges is a good place to start. Also, there is something called the Small Business Administration, or SBA. Yes. And so I put the link for the national SBA, but there are locations all throughout the nation that offer trainings and coaches for free. So look up what your small business administration location is and develop a relationship with them when it comes to entrepreneurship and business. Because once again, that's money coming in that are free to help you develop that small business. Also, HUD has something called a Community Development Block Grant, CBDG for short. And a lot of the CDBG funding goes to entrepreneurship. So if you can look up, find a way, go on Google, make some phone calls and ask which organizations have received CDBG funding. Often those organizations have some sort of small business development incorporated into their programs. So that's another area that you can look into for that. And then for our undocumented community, often the best connection for gaining income is small business development, because unfortunately having access to right to work papers get in the way of, being able to have that stable employment. So small business development tends to be the best practice for supporting those who are undocumented and cannot work at this particular time. So those two resources are helpful for that.
So one of the questions is about what's an MOU. It's a memorandum of understanding. It's an agreement between two agencies or two entities about who's going to do what part of a partnership. And then someone made a statement in the chat about having so many people come together and collaborate. It wasn't an easy adventure. It's very much about looking at the stakeholders, who has a investment in our community, that that we really look at the issues at hand. How do we take care of our community? How do we offer employees to folks that might not have a full staff? How do we offer that opportunity to educate and inform and invite people to see that as a community, we can come together and take care of survivors and address the issues at hand. Gabriella, you've asked a question about how did we get started with incentives. I can find that information for you. I don't have it in my head. I've been a part of Safe Flight and watched all this grow, but I wasn't a part of the behind the scenes. I'm very much been the client services. I know there was some funding sources out there. I know that there was some gifts and some grants. So there is information that I can find for you if you'd like that information. I think my email will be available to you, and we can continue that conversation later, unless Caroline has more specifics about those sources.
Yeah, so before towards the end, I'll show you a list of questions of just where to start with your organization. And step one is really community mapping. Just like Misty said, looking out into your community and saying who has that investment, and then calling them and having a conversation and saying, we have some individuals who can benefit from what you have. What would it take to make that a reality? And then through that back and forth over time, you're able to kind of bring in these relationships. So that's usually how it happens, pretty organically, right? You're at that meeting, that collaborative meeting, and you hear of a training that's being offered, and you introduce yourself to them and see what it's like to bring that training in-house, right? So a lot of it is just organic communication and connection to the opportunities that are already being offered in your community. So you're not recreating the wheel, you're just connecting, you're bridging the gap between what's available and what you need. So that's often, the short answer way of how these things start to happen. But you have to be bold enough as an advocate or as an organization to put yourself in front of these opportunities, because they are not just going to come and knock on your door. And I think that's often where we end up losing out, because we're already so inundated with so much on a regular basis as a victim service provider, that it makes it hard to go and put ourselves in front of these opportunities. But that's often the step that makes a difference in these areas.
Definitely when you begin looking at whole person, you look at self-sufficiency and you look at sustainability. And then you're bringing those partners together. And it's not an easy journey, but it's doable. Our little restaurant started as a little restaurant, and now we've been featured in magazines and things. So it's doable. You just have to reach out and know your audience, know who has what to offer, and who's willing to bring something to the table for you.
A question that I see, Okay, so a couple questions. So the first is, how do you navigate with those providing services to survivors of trafficking in a rescue directive way versus through an empowerment model? I have a lot of follow-up questions to make sure that I understand this. Are you saying, or Carmen, could you type in um, into that chat a little bit more about what you mean so that I can answer that as specifically as possible. And while we're waiting for that, Mika has mentioned crisis management is the starting point through this particular journey. Can you give more examples of what that looks like when working with a victim of HTDVSA? Right. So crisis management is essentially just looking at the safety of that individual. So the first thing is, does this person have access to food? Does this person have housing? Does this person need, mental health support? And if so, to what capacity, right? Is this person still in the environment in which is abusing them? Those are the questions that go under crisis management, is really focusing on safety first, right? Like getting that individual into a place of safety and being able to access basic needs of survival, right? So, food, shelter, are the top areas of that. Mental health is often an area that goes into that. And, we can offer a checklist of what normally goes under crisis management, and many of you are doing that already. So it's just making sure that that individual is no longer or is as safe as possible in that particular time. Is the answer to that. Awesome, cool. Okay, Carmen, would you like to speak out loud, or did you? Let's see. We have several organizations established in the community who have seen as experts on trafficking, but got it. We're already working with ABC on this. You should partner with them. Okay. So there's several organizations in the community. They're experts on trafficking, but they focus primarily on rescue. And so then you're redirected, and you should partner with them. Yeah. So the truth is, when it comes to partnerships and collaborations, you have to think outside. You have to think outside of the box. And often, some of the organizations that people say we should partner with are not always the organizations that we should partner with. And it's up to your discretion as an advocate and as someone who is very intimately aware with your community, what kind of resources and what kind of relationships and connections that you want to bring closer into your network. Okay. And so that's difficult because sometimes, the experts in the field are the only, resource that's available. And so then you have to get a little bit creative and really think outside the box and say, okay, who else can offer this particular resource that we would feel comfortable with. And so that's why building these collaborations can take some time and can feel overwhelming, because it is a lot of just being strategic, going back to the beginning and asking yourself, even though this does not appear like the normal, or the expected partnership, what can be gained from having that relationship? So that's the sort of the redacted answer to that. We can go much more in detail, but I know we have some time restraints. And the other truth is that, you don't have to use all aspects of an organization, right? So one organization can offer really great housing, but they don't offer anything else that's, that you really want to take advantage of. So it's okay to only develop a relationship with them when it comes to housing, and then go elsewhere for any of the other resources that are available. Right. If you can go to the next slide. So just to kind of tie everything together, we don't want you to walk away feeling overwhelmed. Know that this is a process. Know that it takes time. And it takes a lot of trial and error. So it's not something that's going to automatically happen overnight. So please have grace with yourself and your organization as you try to maneuver these relationships. Step one is really learning what is available in your community. Like, you have to really be aware of that. So, you know, do some community mapping. Monica has put a toolkit on how to do some community mapping in your area, and ask yourself, like, who's providing all of the workforce needs in our community? Who's providing it for youth? Who's providing it for adults? Who's providing it for undocumented individuals? And really breaking it down into those barriers that you're experiencing. Do you have the capacity to offer these things internally? And being honest about that. You know, a lot of times organizations and advocates will say, I'll figure it out, I'll do it. Okay, now I'm going to become the job developer. And while that's great, and we're grateful that you're trying your best to meet the needs of your community, it's not always the most practical, right? And so you want to go ahead and see if there's other places in the community that can do that. And then what partnerships can you leverage? And when you have those relationships, can we go into a formal relationship? Can we develop a memorandum of understanding or some sort of contract that makes it clear what that organization will offer and what we will offer in return as an agency, right? You know, and then really doing some training for your internal staff and those individuals that you're going to partner with. You want to train them about the impact of trauma. You want to train them about the barriers that are being experienced at the beginning, so that you all can troubleshoot those challenges together instead of being surprised by them, you know, halfway into the partnership or the relationship, right? So community mapping is step one. And so, you know, we encourage you to really take your time in that process. So are there any other questions or concerns? Okay. Next slide, and I'll turn it over to Moni. Yeah, if you all can take a minute to fill out the evaluation, and Monica will close us out.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Missy and Caroline, for a great presentation and sharing all your great experience, resources, and all of the resources that were shared. We're going to update the handout that was distributed, and we'll send it to you again. And we'll include this chart on the community mapping just for the employment services. And also, we will follow up with you with a recording. And thank you everyone for participating and engaging with everyone. Please share your feedback through and questions as well, and request resources through the evaluation form that is in the link, and we'll send it to you again as well. And you can also request a certificate of participation through there. And also thank you to the sign language interpreters and captioners, and to Jennifer Moran for the tech support. And thank you again for participating, and best wishes with all your work. Thank you for all the work that you do in the community supporting survivors. And we look forward to your participation in the next webinar. And please be in touch with us with any questions and requests for resources. And have a great rest of the week. And we won't close the room yet, because so you can have time to download the link for the evaluation. I'll post it here again because sometimes it gets lost. And also I'll post the link for the web page where we have a lot of these resources that other webinars that we have held before as well are posted here, and many of our resources.
If I may add, I also put in a link for office hours for our Promoting Employment Opportunities for Survivors of Trafficking projects. And so if you, I mean, that's all we do over here is helping to, increase education and employment opportunities for survivors. So please click on that link and schedule a one-on-one or a group office hours session. And we'd love to continue talking about all of these things and making it a bit more tangible for your particular community. So hope to see some of you there.
Yes, and also highlight that you, Caroline, and your team has produced a lot of resources and tools, strategies, and toolkits that are available for people to use as you engage in these strategies, and that also you're available for support as you're engaging. And Missy, of course, also thank you for sharing about your strategies, and we hope to highlight them more in future webinars and resources.